We are here to talk about Raj Kamal Jha's latest book, which is called The Patient in Bed Number 12, which is this book right here. And it is a book that can be described in so many ways, but the word that I would like to choose to describe it to all of you is actually a word that was given to it by a great Malayalam writer, K.R. Meera. So K.R. Meera wrote a blurb for this book in which she describes the book as prosody because of the way in which it intermingles prose and poetry. Because in every time the book ebbs and flows, it feels like poetry. And I think that is such a beautiful way to describe this extraordinary novel. And Raj, I think we should start by giving everyone a taste of this novel. So would you like to read a little bit from it?
Hi. You know, when you write a book, you don't want to read it. You want others to read it, but she's my editor. She's the person who edited this novel and the last novel, and I can't say no to her. So I will read a very short section, but just to set it up, this is a father who is in the terminal stage of his life. He's in the last 1 month, and he's waiting for his daughter to come and visit him. And the nurse walks up to him and tells him that, look, you need to stay fit and you need to stay healthy for your daughter. And this is what he does to do that. Okay? So she tells him, just like we use a very tiny microscopic bit of a virus to make a vaccine that helps the body fight disease, we shall do something similar here. To fight death, we will need life. You won't last long if you just lie here sleeping, staring at the ceiling on the floor. Each day you need to step out and get a moment of a life being lived to the full. That's your daily pill. Then what he does is, he says, oh, well, you know, I'm going to do that. And he says, I am lucky, I am so light that with little effort I rise above the bed. We float, carried by the currents of the room's cooled, disinfected air. I slip up and down along the walls beneath the ceiling via the only window in the room. Those tall street lamps you see, I float past these neons wrapped in blue during the day, raining yellow at night. I fly alongside birds. I ride the jet stream of a passenger aircraft. The gust of a wind pushes me until I become a moving speck very high above this city. The pale red dot in the first light, the dazzling blink in the falling dark. In this year, 2023, with its 1.4 billion people, they, the people, their 1.2 billion plus phones, stack them up, you can walk up to the moon. The good, the bad, the crazy, the demented, the lost, the found, the helter, the skelter, the rulers, the ruled, and the unruly, I see them all, telescopic and microscopic. We are Galileo, I am Galilee. I see the unseen, I see the lives of others in full. But as Sister Shiny, who is the nurse, told me, I need just a fragment, just one little odd, one little end. So I wait and I watch, and I watch and I wait. And when the moment is right, when the alignment is perfect of earth and water, fire and air, space and time, the material and the immaterial, I descend to where they are. I become invisible. I become one-dimensional. I merge with the surface. I flit and I float. I bring my ear close to their heads so that I can listen to their thoughts, the buzz and crackle inside, their neural fires burning. Sometimes, if I'm lucky, I find a broken heart and squeeze myself in to flow with the blood in the narrows of their vessels, unnoticed and unfelt, like I am traffic on the empty streets where we lived once upon a time in this city. Thank you.
Do you all see what I mean when I say it's prose, but it sounds like poetry? Um, if stylistically one can refer to your work as sitting somewhere in between prose and poetry, I think thematically it also sits somewhere between fiction and non-fiction. And I'm very interested in the interplay between fact and fiction in your writing. You've been referred to as the novelist of the newsroom. I don't think it escapes anyone's notice here that your day job involves cold, hard facts. And yet it is fiction that you turn to as an outlet. Why fiction? And what is the role that fact plays in your fiction?
Well, you know that, look, this is my sixth novel, and my first one was in the year 2000, when I was about 7 or 8 years into my life in the newsroom. And right from that time, the reason why I came to journalism, and which keeps me there to this day, is the search for spaces where people tell their stories and are not heard. You know, there is something we keep saying in the newsroom. What is it that you can do as a journalist that somebody with a phone cannot do? And which is going to a place where there is no one, going to a place where the lights don't shine, where the camera does not go, where most people do not talk about their stories. And this is a space where I have found that fiction is a much easier tool for me to tell these stories than journalism. There are many journalists who go to these spaces and do incredible work. But you know, you need to play with the gifts or the cards you are dealt with. So for me personally, fiction is a place to go to those spaces where it is tough to go with the journalistic lens. But these are very important stories. And more so now, you know, we were talking about that. In the last 8 to 10 years, when we have become so polarized, when we are on both sides of the spectrum, we have left this middle space. Yeah. And I strongly believe, it is a belief, but also it is something I see every day. We live in the middle space. You know, the fights we have at work, at home, the bills we pay, our hopes and our fears is all in the middle. We go to either side when we contest ideas. But most of us are lucky to live in the safe middle space, where we don't talk about our secrets and our lies. And so I really like that space as a space for my fiction. And this book is also a search for people who live in that space.
But novelistically, do you owe something to non-fiction? Because both your last book and this book are based on quite specific stories that exist in non-fiction. Mm-hmm. And in the sort of translation into fiction, you are able to give humanity to these stories for me as a reader, but what does that give you as a writer?
No, you're absolutely right. I'm very lucky to work, to live since I spend almost half of my day in a newsroom surrounded by reporters who tell stories. And they come back and they tell their stories. I read them, I look at them, I work at them. And just as, you know, at the end of the day, what lies on the cutting room floor, what could not make it to the newspaper, is what is the stuff where I work with in fiction. It is stuff that is inside the head. You know, I really like what George Orwell says, that in his book 1984, the main character says that everything you do is visible, is watched. Everything can be seen and watched, but not what takes place in the few cubic centimeters inside your skull. And I really think that is the space where we live, which we don't talk about, we don't post on our Facebook, Instagram, we don't forward it on our WhatsApp groups. What we do not do, what we keep inside the few cubic centimeters of the skull is where fiction lives.
And most of the subjects that you write about, these are difficult subjects, Raj. These are difficult subjects to read about in the news, but you approach them with a very light touch. And it helps me, I think, make sense of some of the very, very harrowing bits of information that exists in the world around us, some of the polarizing events that exist in the world around us. I think fiction helps me make sense of those things. But these are, again, come back to this, these are difficult subjects and not easy to think about and live with. How do you do this?
I think at two levels. You know, one is the very daily, practical level of being an editor in a newsroom. So there is a bus accident and 6 school kids have died. But what you're thinking of is, you know, how to tell the story sensitively, how to understand the pain of a parent in a very fair manner, and at the same time to tell the story to those who are not there. And I think at the heart of storytelling, there is a fundamental, I'm not sure what the word is, but we can use the word hypocrisy. So there are two things when you tell a story. You know, one, we tell the story to get to the bottom of it. I'm going to tell you the real story. And at the same time, it's just a story. That it is not something that happened to you. You read what is going on in Gaza, for example. That is very far away. It is not what is happening to you in Thiruvananthapuram. And that gives you the sense of comfort and distance to understand that story. At the same time, if you are a reporter in Gaza, your commitment is to tell that story. So this duality, which is at the heart of storytelling, is something that is also, I think, liberating for a storyteller.
You used a phrase just now, which is, how do we understand the pain of a parent? And one of the things I've certainly noticed about all your novels is that a child character often is quite central to the larger storytelling arc. Particularly in The City and the Sea, the child is very central to the narrative. Why is it that you enter the minds and often hearts and backgrounds of children? Why is it that that is so often the space you're occupying?
One, I think it's a... So one, there's a very, very simple answer and a straight answer. I think a child is the only one in today's polarized atmosphere where it is very hard to take a stand on. You can't be for a 5-year-old or against a 5-year-old. A kid is somebody that is this pure innocence. sort of, a kid symbolizes what is the best inside us. And in fact, the longer we live, every day is essentially we do our best to keep a bit of the child inside us. Everything, be it storytelling, be it doing good things, is essentially to keep the child inside us. You know, uh, and I think so. It just lends itself to a view of the world from a very good place.
So we said thematically somewhere between fact and fiction, stylistically somewhere between prose and poetry. But let's talk structurally, because structurally I feel somewhere between beginnings and ends. There's an almost circular quality to the way you structure your books. They seem to begin where they end and end where they begin, but so much happens in between. How important is structure to you as a novelist? How do you think of or conceive of these structures? And even in this particular book, you must read it to understand what I mean, because just as every chapter ends, it seems to end with a sense of urgency. You're in the present continuous, because the next chapter picks that line up and continues exactly there, but not in the way that you would just think it will go from one chapter to the next. You are somehow in the middle of the story already by the time you start the second chapter. How do you do this?
So one is, I think what resonates with me is what T.S. Eliot has talked about, exploration, that you come back to the same place where you started from and you see it and it seems like the very first time. And I think a lot of what we do in life is essentially circular, is essentially doing the same things, but the risk and the challenges, can we make it feel it is the first time? And so for me, that is a very important part in the emotional arc, that can we come back to where we started and feel strong and feel recharged. And the structure, you're very right, so to me, I think of the beginning, and the writing in the book is the journey to that journey of how do I come back to it in a way that I have seen many new things.
Still staying on the structure a little bit, the other thing that does come to mind is this is really a novel of disparate narratives, to the extent that it could almost have been a short story collection, but by the time it ends, you realize how the narratives also tie in together. And that's actually how we conceived of the cover of this book. It's all these separate threads that end up tying up together. So again, structurally, why this sort of broad picture approach?
And because this book, this particular book, was essentially about solitude. But yet at the same time, even if you are solitary and all by yourself, the way the world intersects with you. And I think that is something that is so fundamental to our current existence. And when the phones we live with, when our, daily the structure of the phone, the algorithm forces us to live with people we like or we tend to agree with. And one of the things I wanted to do in the novel was, and that's why the main character in the novel, his phone is switched off in the beginning. He needs to give the phone back to the doctor. And with the phone switched off, it forces him to engage with people and with feelings that he would never have thought of. And that is his process you know, that's his journey.
This whole thing about solitude that you just talked about, the novel opens in a hospital room, and your previous novel also opens
Yeah,
in a
yeah.
hospital room. And locationally, this is fascinating to me. We've discussed this, that there are very few physical spaces in the world that are great equalizers, but a waiting room in a hospital is one
Absolutely,
of them.
absolutely, yeah.
So how does the space come into the picture? Why is this the space? And as you said, he comes into interaction with the rest of the world
Yeah.
in the hospital.
You know, we talk so much these days about how polarized we have become and how we don't share much in common. You are left or you are right. Very few of us want to be in the middle space. But as I said, most of the time we live in the middle space. In the bus, when we get up, to give a seat to somebody who we think needs it more than us. It doesn't matter who he or she votes for. You know, the lift, you know, just simple daily things. Just, just think of the number of times we rely on strangers. We board a plane. We don't know who the pilot is. It doesn't matter to us, is she left, is she right? Who does she vote for? And I think this faith in strangers, very spontaneous faith, which is also a very pragmatic need, because we need to live our lives and we cannot live our lives if we distrust everybody. I think that is the space I find is what is going to keep us sane, is what keeps us sane, is what keeps us safe. And the waiting room, you know, in a doctor's chamber. So the last 4 or 5 years, because of what we were also going through at home, I spent a lot of time in the lobby of several hospitals. And when you stand there and you look and you just see and you look around, you feel a sense of vulnerability that makes people have faith in strangers, that makes people have faith in expertise. Now, you know, each one of us is an expert. We are all Google doctors, but in a hospital, when a loved one is being taken inside the ICU, for a moment you have faith in people who are not yourself. And you don't worry about the usual markers of what is identity, what is contested identity. And so I find that a very interesting place to explore who we are as a people.
And because we place this trust upon each other on an almost daily basis, do you think we are not, by nature, do you think the human being is not cynical?
Absolutely. I completely agree. You're very right. I think, sort of, you know, I very, you know, sort of, I think that hate, a lot of work, you know, hate needs a lot more work than love. And so hate needs to be sustained, but it doesn't have strong legs. It may have strong hands, but it doesn't have strong legs. It cannot, it is not a naturally irreversible force. It is much, much easier to have faith. We order food at night, the doorbell rings, the young man comes, he gives us food. It is much, much easier not to believe what he may have done to the food on the way to your home. It is much easier to believe in him, to believe in the goodness of him, and to live and to move forward. So I very strongly think that this comfort in strangers, this faith in other people, these daily things that we do, maybe, yeah, to live, to survive, but these are daily gestures of kindness and faith, shows that we are not cynical.
You are quite a hopeful soul for a journalist in today's India.
Yeah, I am, yeah.
But are you really hopeful? Can we deprive hate of its oxygen?
I think we can, and I think more than we can, it will. I think a country of 1.4 billion people, hate cannot be the glue for 1.4 billion. There is no record in human history for hate to have sustained a population of this size and incredible diversity. Uh, and I don't think we are going to make human history. So I am very confident. No, this is the human inside me. This is the parent inside me. I am the parent of a 17-year-old. Yeah. So there is a very strong imperative as well for me to believe in this. But I have been in a newsroom for more than 2 decades now, and looking at the arc of politics and of history, I think this is just another step, and we have to face it, and we need to tackle it in the way we think. Yeah.
And just staying on the same subject a little bit, but also coming back to the writing, you have this extraordinary ability to give us a way to understand and almost sympathize with horrifyingly unsympathetic individuals. Is that where this also comes from, this sense of hope?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think too often we blur the line between what someone does and who they are. And that is why in this book, for example, there is this police officer who's raiding the house of somebody, which is a common thing these days, and he is worried about his daughter who's in the hospital, and the frailty that each one has. And this is not a very new idea. I think fiction, I think art deals with the frailty of everyone, and I'm very lucky that that my circumstances give me the space to think that. I'm very lucky to be where I am, and I know also that it is just the pure chance of birth which has taken me here and taken you here, and the fact that we are sitting here is a pure accident of circumstances. And sort of how do we use that gift we have to look at this?
So one of the other great equalizers was, of course, the pandemic.
Yeah.
And the pandemic is quite central to this book of yours, but did you set out to write a pandemic novel?
No, I did not. Absolutely not. Although it was the pandemic, in the pandemic, as each one of us here would know, we all were touched by loss. Each one of us knows somebody who lost someone. And there was a time during the pandemic when there was an equal vulnerability. Yes, we were lucky that we could stay in our rooms and get paid by coming on Zoom, while there were those who did not have the luxury. We saw a lot of pain and grief. We saw people walk across the country in search of safety. But it was also the first time, the pandemic for a generation was the first time when we realized it doesn't matter who we are. You can't make a phone call that you had to wait for the curve to fall. And that vulnerability was the kind of space that I talk about, that I think it did. Now, whether it had an impact on people, I'm not sure, but for a certain moment, we resonated with somebody who was outside, who was outside the house.
Do you think we have as yet come to terms with something like the pandemic?
I don't think we will ever. No, I don't think we have. I, I think the tendency has been to brush it
Yeah.
under the carpet of time and to think of it as something that should not come back again. Uh, so I am not sure whether we have come to terms with it or we have just moved on.
I suppose where I'm coming at you from this with this question is I I can't think of any great plagues that have been like so deeply created in fiction, like where fiction has been the grand outlet for something like the Spanish flu epidemic or the Black Plague or anything like that. It's almost like one of those things where fiction, it is so big that fiction can't give us a way to come out of it. I would not say the same of other tragedies, like war, for example, but somehow when it comes to plagues and pandemics, has fiction ever really done that?
That's a very tough question. I don't know how art can address it, but I'm sure it has been done at different levels. I think the vulnerability, but I think we are still too close to the pandemic. I think maybe we will see stories come in the next few years. We are still very, very close.
We don't have enough hindsight, is what you're saying.
Yeah, yeah.
But somehow I wonder if we will ever have enough hindsight, because we haven't for other similar epidemics and pandemics.
No, absolutely. And also the fact that today it is much faster, much easier to forget than to remember. And the tendency, again, one of the natural forces is to forget rather than to remember. And also we should not forget this fact that we are a young nation, that 650 million are under the age of 30. And to them, the pandemic was not so bruising as to the others. So it is much, much easier to keep it in the past and look forward.
I am discovering today that your faith and hope in the resiliency of this country is quite extraordinary, and I'm enjoying finding this out about you. I also want to turn back to the writing process. As your editor, I have to confess that you give me very little work, Raj, because when a Raj Kamal Jha manuscript arrives in my inbox, it is a fully formed creature. Not a sentence is out of place, and not a word in any of these sentences is out of place. There is a skill that you have, which I have now come to appreciate as your economy of prose, where there is nothing extra in your writing, that I genuinely, truly admire. How do you think like that? Is it because you're an editor yourself?
Yeah, I think yes, and I think for me the writing process is more about what not to say than what to say. And this makes it very simple to pare it down, that let the reader do a bit of the writing as well. And I like that, to keep these spaces on. And what you see when it is sent to your box, it has gone through multiple iterations, and almost every iteration, the word count has kept coming down. So to me, the editing is a very important part of the storytelling. That what do I cut out? What do I not say? Especially now that there is so much out there, everything is there. What are the silences you want in your novel? More than what are the voices you keep?
You leave a lot unsaid, and there's a tremendous amount to be read between the lines. Have you ever been surprised by somebody's reading of your writing?
Yeah, I have. So I do get mails and I do get phone calls from people who have read things that I didn't even think of, and sometimes I get somebody. It is as if that person was inside the few square cubic centimeters of my skull, and that person was there when I was writing that. But I guess that is something that you leave to the reader. Yeah.
So who are some writers that you admire, and what have you been enjoying reading in the last?
Well, I just last week I read this incredible novel, which is also fact and fiction, by Benjamin Labatut, The Maniac. I don't, if you ever get the chance, please read. It is this wonderful exploration of genius and madness in the world of science. He takes the life of John von Neumann, and he talks about his descent into madness. But at the heart of it is what it means to be a human in the age of artificial intelligence. In the age of artificial intelligence, what does it mean to be a human being? And it is really wonderful.
And will you write non-fiction in book form ever, do you think?
Yeah, I am. I am thinking of doing something on freedom of speech. Yeah.
So much to be said on that subject, but I think we'll want to now move to audience questions.
Good afternoon. Myself Abhijit. I would like to ask one doubt regarding your opinion, whether the hatred is more easy than love, whether it is the ulta, because we will get angry fast, we will become the hate towards a person will spontaneously come. So unless until there is attachment to that person only, we will try to suppress that and try to feel love. And even as you told that hospital is a place where we are helpless, so the arrogance of the humans are totally dissolved. So whether it is that other way, hatred is easy, love is difficult.
That's a very very interesting observation. I'm not so sure which one is easier or tougher, but you are right. Hatred needs a misunderstanding. It needs prejudice. It needs many things. Love needs a lowering of the guard, while hatred needs all the guards to be up. So maybe it needs a much more investment in energy, but you are right. The way we see hatred, it can be lit much faster. It catches fire much easier. We just have to find a way to tackle that. Yeah.
I wonder if it is also that love is subconscious, right? You're not
Yeah,
active.
yeah.
Hatred needs, as you said, an inciting incident, but the default is
default. Yeah,
is
yeah.
trust.
Is trust.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And even if you look at the Darwinian arc
Yeah.
of evolution, it is more living together that helps propagate the species.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I, I want to, I think you saw my eyes light up when you said you're thinking of writing about freedom of expression. What is your verdict, or no, not even verdict, what is your prediction for freedom of expression in India? What is your diagnosis?
It is going to, it will be under strain and stress. Uh, you will find more and more innovative ways to protect free speech. And you'll also, I think we will also see a very stronger understanding of the other point of view to protect your point of view. Uh, that, that I think empathy being a very, very important tool in the protection of free speech. So we will see that happen as we are seeing, but it's going to be a tough time. It's going to be a challenging time. Um, but my years in the newsroom have taught me that, your and my job is to deal with the world the way it is, not with the way we want it to be. We can all wait for that to happen, but we need to deal with the way it is. And we have to find our own spaces and our own freedoms to tell those stories.
Hi, my name is Umesh. So my question is, at this current scenario, you comfortable more with a journalist or as an author? So
Well, I don't see the distinction. I am a journalist and an author. Um, when I go to the newsroom, the author also goes to the newsroom. And when I come home, the journalist also comes home. So I don't see the distinction between the two. But as I said earlier, at this time, it is much more challenging than ever. And in a good way, it's for the first time where we also are, given that everybody has a phone. About 15 years ago, I never got to know what the reader was thinking about something until I got a mail. But today I get a phone call at 6:45 in the morning, and they have read something on page 14 and they are pissed about it. So this is a new normal that the world is also publishing on a daily basis, and you have to deal with it. And so I use both my things as a journalist and as a writer to navigate this.
So that brings my next question is the limitation. As a journalist, you have the limitations, you may be, but as an author, I'm sure there will be no limitation. So is there such thing to the journalist do have limits, to publish his works in a newspaper, but as an author, you don't have that limitation, right?
No, I think they are two very different things. So it is not that one doesn't let. So one lets me tell stories in a certain way. One lets me tell stories in a very different way. It is not that one ties my hands, the other does not. Both tie my hands and both liberate me. But the kind of canvas each one has is very different. So it's like a painter, if you have oil on canvas and you have watercolor, you can do different things, but you don't feel limited in that manner.